Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Friday Parashat class edition and Chodesh Tov as well, Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Question of the day is, what has Hashem done to the first part of every parasha? It seems as though, and it's not coincidental, that parashiot are top heavy, and that means that classes and derashot and speeches are usually focused on the earlier part of the parasha and sometimes on the first pasuk of the parasha. The middle to latter part feels cheated sometimes. But as I said, this is no coincidence. Why is this? Be'ele Toledot Yitzhak ben Abraham holid Yitzhak, and these are the generations, events of Yitzhak, the son of Abraham. Abraham gave birth to Yitzhak. What an unusual pasuk. But the Torah, obviously and purposefully, exposes itself to questions in the first pasuk of every parasha. Some type of obscure and ambiguous language, some type of redundant terminology, unnecessary words, conceptual problems, and there's definitely a reason behind it. Perhaps it's because the first pasuk in the parasha lays the foundation, the conceptual foundation of the entire parasha, the historical context for the parasha. And therefore, there's something in that first pasuk that's sometimes mysterious, that certainly begs for analysis. And therefore, we sit in the Bet Knesset and listen to classes and very often hear a lot about the first pasuk. This parasha, no exception whatsoever. In fact, you will find, especially in Sefer Bereshit, a number of parashiot that where the first pasuk sort of frames life, you can say. We have Ele Toledot Noah. You have last week's parasha, Haye Sarah. You have this week's parasha, Toledot, again, generations, right? We have Parashat Vayeshev. Begins Ve'ele Toledot Vayeshev Yaakov, and then it has Ve'ele Toledot Yaakov Yosef, right? And of course also Parashat Vayechi. All these 5 parashiot in Bereshit, nearly half of Bereshit starts not just ambiguous, but also in a manner of presenting lifetime, life cycles, generations. The Torah obviously is begging us, when we enter into a parasha, not to get too caught up. Don't get lost behind the trees in the forest. Don't get too caught up in specifics. Keep the big picture in mind and focus on what is the larger context of history, and then dive into the story. So it's a setup pasuk. So let's go to our first pasuk in our parasha. Ve'ele Toledot. What's the word Toledot mean? Some say it means generations, lineage. After all, last week's parasha Haye Sarah ended up with Toledot Yishmael. So this week's parasha starts also with the lineage of Yitzhak. Brief, although, of course. Some say the word Toledot referring to events, life events. Certainly Parashat Vayeshev would lean towards that meaning as well. But regardless of the way you explain the first half of the pasuk, and these are the generations, the lineage, the events of Yitzhak, the son of Abraham, what you can't avoid is the second half of the pasuk. Yes, Abraham holid et Yitzhak. Besides the fact that we already know this from Parashat Vayera, Parashat Haye Sarah, that Abraham's son is Yitzhak. When you start off telling me Yitzhak ben Abraham, the first part of the pasuk, that he is the son of Abraham, why turn around and tell me that Abraham gave birth to, or Yitzhak was his son? This is a perhaps second grade level question. You would expect a child at any level almost to ask this question. And it's astounding, if not for the fact that we just spoke about the purposeful introduction of every parasha in the Torah. This, not only no exception, but exceptionally. And therefore, we are very much behooved to try to find out what is going on over here. Step back. Torah asks us to step back and realize that right now we're dealing with something major. We are dealing with, for the first time, the life events of Yitzhak Abinu. Yes, we had Akedat Yitzhak at the end of Perashat Vayera. That was very Abraham focused. Yes, last week's Parashat Hayesara, we found him a wife and he got married. He was a passive actor. He was a bystander in that entire story. In our parasha, we have a set table and an open field because Abraham has passed away and Sarah has passed away. And the very first time, we're going to discuss the second generation of Jewish history. And that is a major discussion. Now, the truth is for us, who fills Abraham's shoes and how that second generation looks might be a bit obvious because we're already somewhat educated. We understand, from our childhood, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, fine. But for a large segment of the world, it's not so obvious because there is someone called Ishmael out there that has to be dealt with. He's an offspring. He's a child. He's a son. He's a beloved son of Abraham Abinu. Albeit he was already, pushed out of the house and made to live separately from Yitzhak. But he came back at the end of his life. He buried Abraham. Last week's parasha gave us Toledot, Ishmael. And this has to be dealt with. And the truth is, if you're a first-time Bible reader, you're right now at the edge of your seat. If you look at this through the broad prism of the larger historical picture, right now, let's go to 2020 because 2021 statistically is not complete. There are 436 billion Arabs in the world. There are 22 Arab nations. As of 2020, the entire world population now is at 7.9 billion, but it was 7.732 billion. And therefore, that is approximately 5.6% of the world population are Arabs. If you think about that for a moment, over 5% of the world descended from one single man. It's pretty amazing. In any case, here the Torah opens up the discussion. Ele Toledot. Let's talk about descendancy. Let's talk about generations. Let's talk about events. And let's talk about how will the world focus look at that time, 3,700 years from now. This was being told, Ele Toledot, 3,700 years ago. How should this world of ours look in 3,700 years in 2020? Will it be 22 nations and 436 billion chosen, beloved, embraced people by God in a nice region of the world that we know as the Middle East and North Africa, with one small pesky nation that seems to be tagging along? They're a wannabe people. And yeah, they came from the same father, but they're not chosen. Is that the way the world's going to look in 3,700 years? Was the question back then. And the broad context of history is the question that every human being needs to ask themselves: who is chosen? Or will it be the other picture, the other way around, which you wouldn't have thought, that the chosen nation is a tiny speck on earth? And the other son of Abraham, the 22 nations of 436 billion people are not. 436 billion people are not. That was a pivotal moment, not just Jewish history, in world history. That was the pivotal moment. That was the moment after Ve'ele Toledot Yitzhak and Abraham. Drum roll, please. I need to know how the second generation looks, because that's going to determine the continuation of world history. The answer, Abraham holid et Yitzhak. That is the critical answer. I've just presented to you, says God, the way this works. I am now saying and stating in no uncertain terms that Abraham holid et Yitzhak, and to the clear exclusion of anyone else, of anything else, I've just made a choice. And by the way, it's possible to read Parashiot Lech Lecha, Vayera, and Hayesara and not necessarily have a definitive answer as to that choice. It is possible. We can have another class on that one day. But at this point in history, HaKadosh Baruch Hu just made a choice right at the outset of the parasha, painted the broad historical picture for us of the human race, of mankind, and as to who is the chosen nation, who's going to carry the baton, who is going to carry forth the mission of Abraham Avinu. This pasuk is not just a non-ambiguous pasuk. It's not just an opening introductory pasuk. It's that pasuk that without it, you might as well not read the rest of the parasha, because it's just stories. It's just details. It's just about a private person's life. With this pasuk, everything changes. It pivots. It focuses the rest of the Chumash, Perashat Bereshit, and everything else going forward. This is the critical pasuk. But you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided? He decided that now that we're talking about descendancy, about chosenness, about who's the real deal, now that we're filtering, and I'm going from Abraham, second generation, filter out Ishmael, bring in Yitzhak. Let's just put the whole subject to bed. Let's just wrap it all up. Let's put everyone into complete focus now. I'm going to kill the suspense now, Hashem says. And so 5 Psukim later, a young woman named Rivka, who's married to that choice of the second generation, who's pregnant, who's struggling, who seeks God, has a premonition and has a dream. And it's one that perhaps, and this isn't, maybe we'll address this in next year's class, she seemingly wasn't informing her husband of this, and seemingly this was only communicated to her, to this young woman Rivka. But she was told in that dream a few critical words about these 2 children inside of her. She was told a little bit about their character, but the main thing that she was told is 3 words: V'rav ya'abod sa'ir. Not as direct, but yet with a clear message. And that is, I've once again made a choice, said God. I just now told the world that Abraham holid et Yitzhak, and now I'm going to finish off, cap off my decision. V'rav ya'abod sa'ir. The elder will be subservient to the younger, and I've now filtered out the 3rd generation in advance, before they're even born. Because now that I'm talking to the world, I'm talking to future religions, I'm talking to Islam, I'm talking to Christianity, I'm talking to continents of people, I'm talking to thousands of nations, I'm talking about to movements, I'm talking about the ethnicities. Now that I'm addressing all of them, I might as well finish the job right now. Let me make it clear. Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Everyone else are spectators. We love you. You're the human race. You're welcome to join. You're welcome to learn. You're even welcome to earn the world to come. But you're not welcome to question my decisions, said HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so here we are with the first pasuk of this parasha, and then as an extension, the first paragraph of this parasha gives us the broadest historical context possible, and pretty much lays the groundwork and paves the path for the rest of the book of Bereshit, for the rest of the Torah, for the rest of the history of Judaism, and for the rest of the history of mankind in this short excerpt in the beginning of our parasha. No wonder it's focused upon. No wonder it opens itself up to question, because it's critical. Because in this pasuk, And in this paragraph, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made the ultimate choices. He's told the rest of the world, while facing us and looking at our tiny nation, that I've made a decision. I choose you. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.